रसूलहिल करीम अम्मा बाद रब्बि इश्रह ली सदरी वयस्सिर ली अमरी वहलुल उक़दतम मिन लिसानी यफ़क़हू क़ौली. Distinguished guests on the dais, Professor Majid, who has recently superannuated. I have had the privilege to witness his grand retirement party and all the love and affection that were, shown to him. And my dear fellow speakers, I'm pleased to present a scholarly synthesis of a research paper addressing a critical and timely subject, the reciprocal dynamics between majoritarianism, religious extremism, and the shrinking space for Muslims in India. India, a nation rooted in the ideals of secularism, pluralistic democracy, is currently confronted by challenges to its foundational ethos. The research interrogates how the rise of majoritarian politics, particularly those propelled by Hindu nationalist currents since 2014, has contributed to the marginalization of Muslims both structurally and socially. It further explores how these processes are not merely unilateral but are producing reactive forms of identity based mobilization and, in isolated instances, extremism among marginalized groups. With due respect to and kind permission of Mr. President, sir, I would like your attention and I would like to begin. In writing about religious extremism, social injustice, and inequality faced by Muslims in India, one is painfully aware that words, no matter how meticulously researched, can scarcely capture the depth of humiliation, marginalization, and systemic violence endured by 20 million Muslims in India. Mere research papers, however well intentioned, struggle to convey the weight of hatred and the scale of prejudice that majoritarian politics has normalized. The Saffron Brigade, through propaganda and cultural engineering, has instilled in young minds a deep seated animosity toward Muslims, framing them as outsiders in their own homeland. And I want your attention now, all of you. Filmmakers like Vivek Agnihotri and Tushar Amrish Goel have weaponized cinema to further this ideological project. Their films, The Kashmir Files, The Kerala Story, The Bengal Files, among others, are not artistic or commercial ventures in the true sense, but are designed as tools of hate mongering, reinforcing communal divides under the guise of patriotism. Mainstream historians, cultural critics, and archaeologists have dismissed these films as pseudo-historical, driven more by prejudice than by any pursuit of truth. Agnihotri's screenplay language, in particular, betrays a disturbing contempt for Indian Muslims. I have been watching this film, The Vaccine War, of lately, and I would like to quote a dialogue as part of the screenplay from the film. In The Vaccine War, for instance, there is a telling moment when a forest ranger mockingly says, "आप लोग monkey catchers को लेकर नहीं आए?" To which the ICMR replied, "उन सब का आज रोजा है." The insinuation is clear and vile, reducing Muslims to demeaning caricatures and binding their identity to ridicule and exclusion. This is not art. It is propaganda masquerading as cinema. And to respond to such cultural venom through academic inquiry is both a duty and a limitation. An attempt to document resistance through words alone can never undo the wounds inflicted by such hate narratives. So I would now read the excerpt, since it's a very long, lengthy paper, full-length synthesis. So I won't be able to, go pairwise. I would just read the excerpts, the very important key excerpts. India's post-colonial imagination is founded on pluralism, a society enriched by cultural, linguistic, and religious diversity. Yet the world's largest democracy faces a growing crisis: the shrinking civic, political, and economic space for over 200 million Indian Muslims. This peril is not an isolated accident of political tides, but the result of deliberate reciprocal dynamics between majoritarian driven religious nationalism and the defensive, sometimes extremist responses it engenders among the marginalized. Labels such as descendants of Babar and Aurangzeb have become shorthand for delegitimizing the community's place in India. Mr. Timekeeper, I would like to mention that since I'm suffering from stage 4 lungs cancer, I'm not able to speak so fluently with such speech rate. So I would be needing 5 extra minutes. I'm not able to move my neck because recently I had a very long surgery. But this topic was so burning that I could not resist myself. Day before yesterday, I drove myself from Delhi to this place only to be a part of this seminar and to present my views, because at the very outset I said that words cannot mitigate the level of hate mongering that has been inflicted upon millions of Muslims. Labels such as descendants of Babar and Aurangzeb have become shorthand for delegitimizing the community's place in India. This casual rewriting of history contributes to a powerful political narrative that recasts Muslims as outsiders rather than citizens with deep, enduring ties to the land. The danger of such rhetoric lies not only in its distortions but in its ability to polarize public opinion and justify discrimination against millions of ordinary people. Equally troubling is the growing hostility towards India's secular traditions. To insist on secularism in such times is to be branded as pseudo-secular, a pejorative that reduces a constitutional value to an accusation. Yet, this is precisely the challenge before us, to defend diversity at a moment when state machinery and social forces seem aligned in their intent to erase it. The systematic sidelining of secular narratives from public memory through selective history, politicized education, and orchestrated propaganda is more than cultural re-engineering. It is a project of exclusion that the central government has undertaken. The consequences of this project are playing out on the streets. Recent scenes of police violence against Muslim youth who gathered only to express respect and devotion to their prophet reveal the stark disparity in how law and order is applied across communities. When acts of faith are met with state-sanctioned brutality, it signals not merely overreach, but a disturbing normalization of prejudice. Such events have a chilling effect as they intimidate a community into silence while emboldening those who thrive on hate. Such scenes echo an alarming pattern. When marginalized communities assert dignity, their demand for recognition is reframed as sedition. Now, the historical background, pre-colonial and colonial legacies. The relationship between Hindus and Muslims in the Indian subcontinent, stretching back over a millennium, is neither monolithic nor static. Medieval South Asia bore witness to syncretic cultural forms, Sufi and Bhakti traditions, shared festivals, and vernacular literature representing everyday coexistence. However, periodic spasms of conflict and political contestation also arose, especially as various empires jostled for power. Partition and post-independence settlement. The trauma of partition in 1947, as we all know, marked by mass killings, rapes and displacement, left deep scars. Muslims who remained in India, now a minority overnight, inherited legacies of loss, suspicion, and conditional belonging. In the constitutional framework for independent India, Muslims and other minorities were promised equality. I say were promised. They are not being promised. They were promised equality, cultural autonomy, and personal law protections. Yet, as case studies from 1940s to contemporary times show, the tension between promissory secularism and lived discrimination would only grow with each passing decade. Now, there is review of literature incorporating Gramscian hegemony, Fraser's recognition and redistribution. There are certain empirical studies and socio-economic trends. Now this is a very important part, intersectionality, gender, religion, and caste. Recent feminist research and intersectional analysis reveal the layered exclusion faced by Muslim women and lower caste Muslims. The triple burden of gender, religion, and caste often renders their struggles invisible in academic and policy circles. Muslim women's labor force participation is among the lowest in India, exacerbated by stereotypes about conservatism and state neglect. Anti-hijab agitation, such as in Karnataka, spotlights the persistent policing of Muslim women's embodiment as both religious and political statement, state law and institutional discrimination. Scholars have
Mr. Irfan sir, we are highly impressed by your considerate opinion about it. Inshallah, people will be benefited.
I'll just take last 2 minutes.
Actually,
Methodology.
we are short of the time. We have to just accommodate and finish.
Only one last minute. The results. I have to share with you the results. Policy shifts and legal disenfranchisement. CA, NRC and the infrastructure of exclusion. Demolition of bulldozer justice. Waqf law reforms and religious autonomy. Empirical data, economic, social and educational indicators. There are several. Violence and societal hostility, rhetoric and reciprocal extremism. Discussion we need to discuss some other day because we are falling short of time. Case studies. I'll just briefly discuss the case studies. Assam NRC, statelessness and gendered exclusion. Uttar Pradesh, bulldozers and protest suppression. Delhi pogrom 2020, state complicity. Anti-hijab protests and educational exclusion. Waqf law protests, as I have already mentioned, rights, resistance and retaliation. So before I conclude, I'm reminded of, I just wanted to end my paper presentation, although I've not done justice with the way I should have presented. But very selectively, I've chosen few lines from a poem of Javed Akhtar Sahab, Naya Hukmnama. बहुत सारे अशार थे जिसका मैं तफसील से जिसके बारे में पढ़ सकता था, लेकिन मैंने इसी को चुना. नया हुक्मनामा. किसी को हुक्म है सारी हवाएं हमेशा चलने से पहले बताएं कि उनकी समत क्या है. हवाओं को बताना ये भी होगा चलेंगी अब तो क्या रफ्तार होगी. हवाओं को ये इजाजत नहीं है कि आंधी की इजाजत अब नहीं है. किसी का हुक्म है दरिया की लहरें जरा ये सरकशी कम कर ले अपनी हद में ठहरे. अगर लहरों को है दरिया में रहना तो उनको होगा आप चुपचाप बहना. किसी को हुक्म है इस गुलसिता में बस एक रंग के ही फूल होंगे. कुछ अफसर होंगे जो ये तय करेंगे गुलिस्तां किस तरह बनना है कल का. यकीनन फूल तो यकरंगी होंगे मगर ये रंग होगा कितना गहरा कितना हल्का ये अफसर तय करेंगे. किसी को ये कोई कैसे बताए गुलिस्तां में कभी भी फूल यकरंगी नहीं होते, कभी भी हो नहीं सकते कि हर एक रंग में छुपकर बहुत से रंग रहते हैं. जिन्होंने बाग यकरंगी बनाना चाहे थे उनको जरा देखो कि जब एक रंग में 100 रंग जाहिर हो गए हैं तो कितने परेशान कितने तंग रहते हैं. किसी को ये कोई कैसे बताए हवाएं और लहरें कब किसी का हुक्म सुनती हैं. हवाएं हाकिमों की मुट्ठियों में हथकड़ी में कैद खानों में नहीं रुकती. ये लहरें हैं रोकी जाती हैं तो दरिया कितना भी हो पुरसुकून बेताब होता है और इस बेताबी का अगला कदम सैलाब होता है. So my dear friends, for all those people across this great democracy, across this great nation who are dreaming of making India a Hindu Rashtra, I would just like to say one last sentence from the movie Krish 2. मैंने आपके सपने को फिर सपना कर दिया. अस्सलाम वालेकुम रहमतुल्लाह.